Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I'm going to try to answer a few quicker questions. I had some longer ones too, which I might try to do in a future video. But for now, let's do some quick questions, starting with this one from Jedi KFC, who asked, "Hey Thor, October's almost over. Wasn't Kathleen Kennedy's contract expiring?" And yeah, it is, or should be expiring any time now. Her contracts have tended to be in October and every 3 years. The last one was in 2021. We heard about it in November that she was re-signing. The previous time in 2018, we heard about it in September. So there is some fluctuation in when we hear about it or when the announcement gets made. For all we know, behind the scenes, she has already re-signed and they haven't announced it. Or perhaps the reason why we haven't heard anything yet, and maybe won't for a while, is she is not coming back. She's either being fired or she is retiring. She is like 70 years old, so that is not an impossibility too. And no matter how she eventually goes, I'm pretty sure it'll be said that she is retiring. It's not going to be like they're going to announce we're firing her and unceremoniously kind of can her. So yeah, we know her contract is supposed to be up any day now, essentially, though I wouldn't expect, if they are firing her, I wouldn't expect to hear about it for a while yet, so it'll be a good sign. The longer we go without any sort of announcement, I think that'll be a good sign if you're someone hoping Kennedy gets fired or is leaving. And I say that because I would have to imagine with Star Wars Celebration coming up in April, which is like 6 months away, that it'll be used to be not necessarily the announcement. I think we would hear an announcement shortly before Celebration, and then this celebration will be pitched as the celebration of Kathleen Kennedy's time at Lucasfilm, which I know some of you are probably laughing or wondering why that would be. But going along with not firing her or saying they're firing her, they're going to celebrate her time here. It is going to be a lot of pomp and circumstance around it. There's going to be a lot of thank yous and God, you did so much for Star Wars and all that sort of thing. They're not just going to fire her and kind of disgrace her, if you will, no matter what they may or may not feel about her behind closed doors if you're Disney, about her time here, which if you're just looking at the raw numbers, as we have discussed many times before, she really hasn't been too successful with the franchise. Yes, the sequel trilogy made a lot of money. I'm sure they have made a lot of money off other Star Wars things as well, but overall, the trajectory of Star Wars has gone down. We have seen that with the Acolyte's recent numbers, where that is the least watched show. It is like a fraction of what The Mandalorian got 5 years ago, and we haven't had a film in theaters or won't have one for almost 7 years when the next one, when The Mandalorian Grogu hits theaters in 2026. So there are a lot of reasons why Disney would be very unhappy with her, and yet they have kept renewing her contract. But this time, if I had a guess, if I had a bet, I would say Kennedy will be gone this time, and it will be announced at or shortly before Celebration. And then we will have a celebration of Kennedy at this year's event. Though I think many will just be celebrating that she's leaving, and that'll be Disney's opportunity or Lucasfilm's opportunity to try to turn the franchise around. Now, there's every chance that whoever replaces Kennedy will be about the same, or maybe even worse, or maybe only slightly better. But if they can find the right person and introduce them at a celebration and they say all the right things, and then over the next few years projects get better, then there's a shot you could win some of your disgruntled fans back and keep the ones you still got happy. I think everybody is kind of holding their breath until Kennedy is gone to see what becomes of Star Wars after. And like I said, that's their shot. And if they fumble it, if they put the wrong person in there, it's just right back to square one here, where we are right now with Kennedy, where a lot of fans are just unhappy with the direction of the franchise. All right, moving on. Next question we have is from Just Russ 83, who asked, "Hey Thor, what do you think about the budget of The Force Awakens being over $600 million? And I think that is a ridiculous number that shows just how confident they were in that movie, that it was going to make them 3-4 times that much. They knew that movie was going to be huge. It might be the biggest guaranteed success in the history of film. And though you would still think they would want to optimize profits and not throw $600 million. And for the record, I think I've heard more of $500 million. I don't know if this is maybe with inflation today or what, but it's a lot of money one way or the other. 500, 600 million, when you're talking that much, does it really matter? But yeah, I think it just shows that they had nothing but confidence that the movie was going to be a smash hit. They spared to no expense. They threw as much money at it as they needed to, as they wanted to. And we ended up with a film that actually made a ton of money. I think at the time, the film was mostly enjoyed. I think most people liked it. I think it was exactly what a lot of people think Star Wars is supposed to be. This more kind of fun action-adventure movie, which you're not wrong, you're not right. That is kind of what Star Wars is. I always talk about how you do want to have a little more substance under the spectacle surface. But yeah, that's a ton of money. That's a ridiculous amount of money, and I wouldn't expect them to be doing that again anytime soon with Star Wars. All right, and moving on, we have a question kind of related to that last one from a psychedelic dude who said, "Hey Thor, quality versus quantity. Most of us agree that quality is more important than quantity, but does that mean to any extent? As a fan of Star Wars, or any franchise really, how much quality are you willing to sacrifice for quantity or vice versa? So let's say you are the head of Lucasfilm and could make your favorite, most interesting, intriguing, and entertaining storyline, and let's say you could send this to yourself to any point in the past. What would you rather make?" And they list some options here, a perfect movie or a long 10-season series and so on. And for me, it's always quality over quantity. I would take the perfect movie over anything else, essentially. I don't care how long it takes to get, well, I mean, I care, but I don't care, in theory, how long it takes to get another movie or another series. I would rather have something Star Wars every other year or every 3 years, like it was back in the prequels and OT, than something every year or something every 6 months. That's kind of substandard. Give me that one good project over pretty much anything else. All right, and on to the next one, which comes to us from Chaotic Yak 1, who asked, "Hey Thor, you mentioned something in passing that I have thought about myself. Recasting. I always had hoped that we'd get the sequels as basically the heir to the Empire trilogy. That is obviously impossible with the original cast at this point. However, do you think that recasting Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, etc. could actually work? Personally, I'd be open to the idea, but very cautious." And I mean, first of all, they should have got it right the first time around. The biggest mistake of the sequels was not fully taking advantage of the original characters. I honestly think the first movie in the trilogy, I know I've said this before, it should have been really their movie getting one last final win for all the big characters from the OT. And then at the same time, as you're getting this win, yes, you have new characters in there and you kind of start to hand off the torch. And by the end of the trilogy, it's mainly about the new characters. As for recasting, it's tricky because a lot of people, I mean, to be honest and blunt, a lot of people don't want to like anything Disney does with the original trilogy or the original characters anymore. They're so upset, and I would say justifiably so, that they screwed it up the first time, that they're not going to give them the leniency to try again, or they're not going to give them the benefit of the doubt going in. They could do it and pull it off really well, and yes, you'll have some people who would just refuse to like it, but who knows, maybe that is the way to do it. Just recast them and kind of try again. I'm not going to be surprised if what the Mandoverse kind of turns into is something like that, where we would get a movie at some point with the original trilogy crew taking on Thrawn and some of the Mandoverse characters as well. If that could be the Filoni movie that we've heard about. All right, the next question, and it kind of goes along with that previous one, comes to us from a noob have Dasarma. I think I got that close to right. But they said, "Hey Thor, do you think the best way for Star Wars to be relevant again is to just start new? No Skywalkers, no Palpatine, no direct connections to the main 3 trilogies. Just a new trilogy set in the distant future with new stories, new characters, new factions, new technologies and weapons, new ships, and so on. I'm honestly tired of seeing the same few faces all the time, which is kind of why I'm interested in what Ahsoka has to offer in its next season with the new trajectories for the Rebels, Gang, and Baylan. Thoughts?" As much as I think they should never fully move away from, say, the Skywalker saga time period, I think you're always going to get shows and books and movies sprinkled throughout the years to come, and I think they should. But I think overall, Star Wars does need to, I think I said it in yesterday's video, they need a new, fresh coat of paint on the franchise. It does kind of get tiring seeing the same kind of couple dozen characters just doing everything all the time. Not saying I wouldn't take, like we were just discussing, a film about the original trilogy characters, just kind of getting one last big victory, even if it is a recasting. I think that could work and be good if the fans would accept it. But overall, Disney needs to make Star Wars their own. They can't just keep taking what was done before and kind of retreading or recycling it and doing the same things with the same characters over and over again. They either need to go far into the future and start a new kind of story I don't think things need to be totally different with technologies and that sort of thing. I don't think you really want to go to the future in terms of you're far advanced technologically, but just new things, new characters, new planets, new all of that with the same kind of core feeling of Star Wars underneath. It'll be hard to do, but I think it's what they need to do. All right, and one more question here, and it comes to us from Veterlit Torf, who asked, "Hey Thor, what do you think about the Use Calamari from the Thrawn Trilogy? Do you think their ability to negate the Force goes against the lore?" Maybe a little bit. I don't really love the idea of it, but at the same time, I read that book many, many years ago when I was like 13 in 1991. And as I've talked about before, at that time, I didn't really question what they were doing with Star Wars. I just accepted it. It was now part of Star Wars. This was, in my head, this was the sequel to Return of the Jedi. No ifs, ands, or buts, no disputing it. And so when the Use Calamari were in there, I didn't even think if this was a good idea or bad. It became part of my accepted lore, if that makes sense. And that goes for a lot of things in the EU. I know I complain a lot about what Disney does with Star Wars, and then you could argue the EU has maybe done things that are even worse with the lore in comparison to Lucas's ideas. But the problem is I took those as, again, when I was younger, when I didn't question Star Wars, I kind of just integrated them into my beliefs and my lore. I can now look back and say, well, some of those things weren't so good. Some of those things might even be downright bad. But the reason why I tend to question Disney more is because they kind of have the completed story. Again, a lot of the EU stuff came along even before the prequels, so it's not like they knew that some of the things they were doing were going to contradict or conflict with what Lucas was going to do in the prequel, so I kind of forgive that. But Disney doesn't have that leeway. They knew everything, and yet they continue to do things that maybe don't mesh well with Lucas, and that's their prerogative to do so, but doesn't mean I have to like it. But to get back to the question, I don't really have a problem with the Use Calamari. I don't have a problem with maybe things being able to mentally influence you or restrict your ability to use the Force, if you will, or kind of mess with it, maybe I should say. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It kind of is what it is, and you do need to bring in some new and different things. You do need to explore some new ideas. I know I can be very fussy about what those ideas are, but yeah, you do have to sometimes accept things that maybe you don't like, but make the stories more interesting, I guess is the way to put it. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think of my answers, or you can answer any or all of these questions yourself. Tell me what you think about any of it. Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do, start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.